There we go. So if you'd like to stay in the room, I'd love to have you. So my name is Kelly, and I realized my gardeners have just decided that they're going to do their, what do you call that, blower and zipper. But so I'll try to stay muted for best I can. But you've made it to the Kind Mind Community Room, and I'm super happy to have you on this lovely August 9th morning. We are graced with the presence of Christine Heath, someone who I admire very much and sort of like I do all, creeped on for the last 3 years listening to some of the podcasts and things that she does. And without, giving the whole bio, which some of you might have read during the during your journey here, the events page has all of her particular information. She's worked in marriage and counseling, and she has had the privilege of opening up the three principles in an institute in the grandest of ways. Sorry, let me welcome these people in the room. There's a whole list of them. People that love you, Christine. So she's had a lot of experience, let's say, in this understanding, and my experience of her was seen in some of the conversations that she had with other practitioners and other people guiding the room in her own wisdom. And Chris, without botching or cutting out something that may be important, if there's anything about yourself that you would like to share before we begin, I'd love you to do so. Each time I ask the speaker, would you like me to go through your bio? And I remember Dickon very famously saying, "Let's just skip the bio, shall we?" so, so I'm going to change my view for the people who might watch the recording and put you on speaker. And lastly, I will welcome the people who have just come into the room. You're at Kind Mind, and we're with Christine Heath. And Christine, I'm going to turn the room over to you. And thank you for being here so early in the morning.
Okay, no problem. I guess the thing for me is that there's absolutely nothing in my bio the problem with your bio is as you get older, it gets bigger and it gets less relevant. So it doesn't really matter. I'm just a really lucky human being that came across this understanding many, many, many years ago. And as a result of that, my life changed and transformed, and um, it's been kind of my calling, I guess, if you will. I had an experience and thought, oh, this is going to be the work I do for the rest of my life. And indeed, that has come to be true. So when I talk to people, I usually like to answer questions. I think it's kind of easier for me to be relevant to you. If anybody has any particular questions about anything they'd like to hear about, you name it, I've done it basically. I've been a therapist for since 1976, and which is probably older than most of you. Some of you are anyway. And I set up the first real, large clinic based on the principles when I lived in Minnesota. And then I moved from Minnesota to Hawaii and set up a clinic here that we've been providing services to the people of Hawaii since 1985. So we have a sustainable practice, and we do lots of training. And most recently, I've been on the board of directors for Three Principles Global Community, which is our attempt to try to get this message out to the world. And we do all kinds of wonderful things. I get great experiences and get to talk to a lot of really beautiful people doing that. So is there anything in particular that anybody would like to ask a question on, or would like me to talk about, or?
Well, I'd love you to talk about when you came to this understanding, if you could, because there's some people in the room, Chris, that aren't familiar with you or the principles, and they're coming to see and hear something new. So maybe you could share a little bit about the beginning times and how you came to this. Would that be
Okay.
okay? We could start
Sure.
there. Okay.
Sure. I was a therapist, and I specialized at the time working with some of the most severe family problems that you can have: incest and sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic violence. And at the time, there was very few people that did that. I was kind of um, a pioneer in that particular field. But I got really burned out. I was really crispy around the edges. I wasn't sleeping at night. I had really hard time with relationships. I was working compulsively. And I had decided actually that I'd go into some other kind of work, because I thought that everybody I knew in the field of psychology wasn't very happy, and my clients weren't happy, and I was not happy. And so I thought, really, this is kind of a bunch of crap. So I was going to get out of the field. And then one of my colleagues had gone down to a training or a little talk down in Florida. And when he came back, he and I weren't friends. We were colleagues in the same building. We had our office in the same building, but we weren't really friends. We kind of didn't like each other, actually. And, but for no really good reason. We just had thoughts about each other. And then he came back, and was telling me about this training he went to. And mostly he was telling me about this woman he met, and that he fell in love with her, and she was going to be moving up to be with him. And I thought, oh, he found a partner. So he also was saying, oh, and there's this new paradigm in the field. And I think that's what I'm doing now. I'm going to be working from that paradigm. I really wasn't interested in the paradigm, because at the time I kind of thought I knew everything that was out there. And, but I was interested in him finding a partner. It was like, oh, interesting. So I thought, well, maybe I should start going to psychology conferences instead of bars. Maybe that way I could actually find a husband that wasn't, a problemed person. And so I thought, okay, I'll sign up for it. So then I thought, well, if I meet somebody the first day and I'm not signed up for the optional second day, they'll think that it's, purposeful that I've signed up for the second day. So I'll sign up for both, just in case. I don't have to go to the second day. So I was the first person to sign up for both days, as the story is told. And so I went in the morning, and I was my usual argumentative self. So I was asking all the questions in the audience about, well, what about this? What about that? And I remember he would answer me in a way that was so different that I couldn't understand it. But I thought everybody else in the room was smarter than me, because they were PhDs and MDs. And I thought, oh, they probably all understand him, so I'm not going to follow that up with an embarrassing second question. So I'd go on to the next one, and he would answer me again, and it would like go over my head. So we met for lunch with all the people. I had a clinic at that time, and we met for lunch, and we were talking about this new paradigm, and how what we did was really good too, and that it wasn't that really different from what we were doing, and basically kind of bad mouthing it and not hearing anything different. And we got up from the table, and I remember it was kind of one of those weird things that happened that, you know how when you're watching a television show and all the characters stop except for the main character who keeps walking? And it was like that experience happened. And I turned around and I thought, oh, weird. And then I turned around again, and I was walking out, and Dr. Mills had gotten out. Dr. Roger Mills was the man who came up to do the talk, and he met me going out. I'm sure now, looking back at it, he wanted to settle me down so that I wasn't asking so many argumentative questions. But I was asking him about it. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe I could, by this time I knew he was single. So I was thinking maybe I could get dinner. We could go to dinner or something. So I thought I should listen to him so I could converse with him. But I remember walking down that hall is he was talking to me, and the words he used felt like it came from melted butter. It was just so smooth. The feeling he was coming from was the nicest feeling I think I'd ever felt from another human being. And so I went back in the afternoon, and I started listening. And what I heard, now this is December of 1980. And in those days in psychology, it was considered bad therapy to focus on the positive. Like that was considered something that religion did, but in therapy, we got in with the insanity of people to kind of connect with that to make them better. And so I'm listening, I'm going, positive. Yeah, I could do positive. That's a possibility. And then we had a break, and I went up to this doctor. And at the time, I was a pretty conservative person, and I wasn't really into following, weird trips or doing things like that. And I went up to I went back to this doctor, and I said, well, what do you think? And he said, well, I think it makes good common sense. I was like, well, if a doctor thinks this makes good common sense, maybe I should listen. So I went back, and now I had beers. Now I was really listening for what was different about this. And all of a sudden, I just had a really huge shift. And I realized that I had been looking at life backwards, that I was looking at my life thinking that it had to change, or it was causing how I was feeling, was creating my experience. And all of a sudden I had this shift, and I went like, oh, no, my thoughts are creating what I'm seeing. And it's kind of like your life flashes before your eyes. So I figure that that's as close to a life ending experience as you can get. But what flashed in front of my eyes was all of the moments in my life that I had misinterpreted. And I just cracked up laughing, because I realized that I'd been like in therapy for 7 years, analyzing my past, analyzing what was wrong with me. And I made it up. It was my own thinking. And that was hilarious to me. It was just hilarious. And so like now I'm like in the best feeling I've been in a long time. Like I was super burned out, came late, was kind of dragging along. And at the end of the thing, I was smiling, and I started smiling for the next 3 days, so much so that my cheeks hurt because I was so serious before that. So after this, I thought I wanted to spend more time with him, not because I wanted to date with him, but because I really wanted to learn what this was. Because I had also realized that it wasn't him that made me feel that way, that was really the huge insight that I got, that it wasn't him doing it. So I met him in the hotel, the lobby of his hotel. And it was, somebody's from Minnesota. It was the Hyatt in Minneapolis, downtown Minneapolis. And I was sitting in the chair, and he was sitting in a chair, and he's talking to me about his past and, where he went to college and just his general chit chat. And it felt like all of a sudden 1,000 volts of electricity went through my body. And I was like, oh, I am being changed right now. And this is going to be my work for the rest of my life. And oh my God, this is really an amazing experience. So it was like, it's hard to put that into words, but it was one of those experiences that you can't really put into words. And I started feeling like I was walking just above the ground, so I was kind of floating through life. And I kept getting insight after insight. And I remember I said to him, I said, I don't need to be in therapy. There's nothing wrong with me. And, here's this poor guy who just met me, a day ago. And he's like, well, I don't know, like what you need to do. But I don't think he'd ever seen anybody change quite that quickly himself. So that was my journey. So I started to, I went in to see my clients on Monday. And I said, I went to this training this weekend, and I'm going to change how I do my therapy from this point forward. And this is what I'm going to do. And at the time, I had 65 clients a week that I saw, and they were all like so thrilled. But what got to them the most was that I was happy. And what they saw in me was a feeling, and what they felt was something really magical. And as they kind of listened, and they started to hear what I was saying, they got interested in it. And that was the beginning of a change in my practice. So over a weekend, I went to a training and came back a different person. And you could tell it in the notes, like the notes of the clients. I had everybody in those days do their own notes, so that, because it was too much for me to keep track of. And it was like a different therapist came in and started talking differently to people, and started talking about health and how our natural state of being is to be healthy. And when we get a shift in our understanding, so that we start to see life from within, everything changes. We start to feel differently. We start to think differently. We start to act differently. Everything is different. And this really unbelievable feeling comes through. And as it would come through, I learned to let it guide me, because in those days we didn't have any. Now there's tons of books and tons of videos and tons of things to listen to. But in those days, we didn't even have cell phones yet in those days. I'm just putting this in context for you, that this was back in the day where there was nothing to do but read a book and listen to a cassette tape. And so Joe Bailey had one cassette tape by a man named Sidney Banks, and it was called Seminar on Mental Health. And that tape I listened to every night for the next 6 weeks. Every night I come home and turn it on, because I think, okay, what did I do wrong today? And I listened to see kind of how to decontaminate myself from my previous psychological training. And so as it were, I changed, and each day I was different. My clients would learn, we kind of learned together, and we were moving. And then I had an opportunity to go down to Miami, Florida, where there was a small, it was the Advanced Human Studies Institute. And I went down there expecting to see this big institute with lots of people in it. And I walked down, and there was a one secretary that was a secretary for 5 people, and they had one room in this. It was very small at the time. So there was 2 people, 1 room. And so I would stay at a hotel, and I went back and forth. And about a week later, Sidney Banks actually came down to that for a vacation. And so at the time, people would talk about the feeling they were in, the feeling. And I thought, are they talking about the feeling I got when I first learned this? Like, there was something in me that said, I think there's something deeper here they're pointing to, Chris. And so I just kept listening. And then I went to hear Mr. Banks talk, and the feeling that he talked from was very deep. And all of a sudden it felt like my mind cleared, and I just got very quiet in my mind. And something really settled in me that was the most unbelievable feeling. And from that point on, I was lucky enough to be a student of Mr. Banks's, and was able to get his counsel for many, many years, and started talking about these principles, and have been on a ship. Like, I was in Minneapolis, and then I left Minneapolis in 85 and came to Hawaii. And then I moved back to Minneapolis in 2003, and left there again and came back to Hawaii in 11. So I've been kind of going back and forth between Minnesota and here, and traveling all over the world, talking about the principles and how it works. And one of the things that we've always been kind of careful about is to not insinuating that we know anything other than anybody else. And so my friend Judy Sedgman and I were talking, and I thought, we're kind of old, we might as well just go for it. So we decided we'd take the field of psychology on directly, and we started doing our podcast, which is called Psychology Has It Backwards. And so we're really talking about how, without that inside out understanding of how we create our reality, that what we do in psychology has lots of things that are helpful, but the principles kind of pull it all together and give it some form where there's principles to go back to. So that's what we've been doing. That's what we've been up to, is sharing that. And it's been really great fun for me, because it's I'm kind of a rebel at heart, and it's kind of getting back to my true rebel nature.
I love that you said that you're a rebel because I feel that there couldn't been better meeting of the minds other than between you and Judith Sedgman. And I was so happy to hear. So psychology has it backwards, everybody. I'll type that in the chat in just a second. Um, it's an amazing podcast. 43 episodes, I think. Is that where you're at, Chris? Yes.
Yeah. Hmm. Yep. We
So
got
I
a new we have two, we've done two more, so we're at least going to be at 45 soon.
I look at you two women as real powerhouses, and I love when you said, "Hey, we're getting old. We might as well just put this to the test." Can you tell us a little bit about, or tell me a little bit about, so so a lot of people here may or may not know the principles, and they may not know some of the names, but they do know that the psychology field has kind of opened up the realm, and there's a lot of people participating that are psychologists in the community of three principles. And there's something to be said for the board and now some of the standards in which the community is putting forth. And you're part of that. You're producing conversations that are part of that. So my question is, for people new to the room that maybe just want to be listening and maybe be a practitioner, where do you suggest they go? What do you suggest they do? They're not psychologists, including myself. Not being a psychologist, not having that credentialing, what would you suggest, or what would you say to people in that realm?
Well, I would say we have at Three Principles Global Community, we have two programs. One is an apprentice program. So if you're doing something where you're helping people and you want to start to understand the principles and kind of incorporate it into your work and kind of get your own grounding on it so that you can do your work from that understanding, um, that would be a great place to go. There are lots of really good um, people who do all kinds of training and I mean, I would, with, I guess, just, I think I'd go to Three Principles Global Community and do the apprentice program. And then when you're there, there's all kinds of practitioners on the site. And some of them do personal coaching, some of them do training. So there's lots of different things, but you have to really get this for yourself first. So in whatever way you want to see it for yourself, you have to start with, I mean, I would advise you to start with that, because if you're trying to use the principles as another technique to use in your practice, it's not gonna work out, because it's such a different paradigm that you can't, like, people will say, oh, it's part of my toolbox. It's part of the tools in my toolbox that I use to help people. But actually, it's a different toolbox. And so when you try to put it into the old toolbox, it doesn't work very well. So first of all, I would go to sidbanks.com. And on sidbanks.com, Sid Banks is a Canadian, and a Scotsman first and then a Canadian. He lived on Salt Spring Island, which is right off of Vancouver Island. And he is the deepest source of this understanding. And I would listen, go on that site, by the way, there's listen and there's watch. I would go to watch because those are the videos. And I would sit and listen to those and see what speaks to you in that, and then see how that guides you. But there are lots of really wonderful people who are doing training and are doing this. Judy and I are starting a program for professionals specifically who want to see how to leave the old psychology behind and kind of see how they're doing it backwards. But there are, One Thought is a really good program in England, and Pransky and Associates have really good training. Dick and Bettinger is an excellent training program. So there's lots of people out there. I think that any one of them would be fine. And there's people I don't even know about who I'm sure are fine too. This has gotten way beyond me. But if you wanted to get with people who are the kind of the original people that got to hear something from Sydney, who is really the man. I mean, this man is the story of his life is incredible because he wasn't a psychologist, he wasn't a teacher, he wasn't a therapist, he wasn't anything. He was a welder, and he was just looking for happiness, and something happened with him and he fell into a really deep state of consciousness, a really deep state of understanding of how thought works to create everything in life, how mind works through us. And him being able to bring that forth at a time when we could actually get him on tape, because he's passed away now, but we have him on tape, and the power of the message is still very deep. So the hope in that is that anybody can change. Like my mother always told me, she said, honey, you tell your clients if this can work for you, it can work for anybody. So, you know, if your mother says that it's a powerful message. But that's, I mean, what happened to him is the most powerful thing, because he literally transformed from an uneducated, he had a ninth grade education, welder, to speaking at universities and speaking to physicists. And we had an innate health institute at the University of West Virginia Medical School that was based on his work. So there was a lot of really incredible things that came from him and continue to come from him. So that kind of the wave of the feeling that, you know, it's like when a human being hits that state of consciousness, it's kind of like an atom bomb going off in the world. And there's waves of truth that come from that, waves of change, waves of power that transform people. And so that'd be the first place to go. And as you listen to what he says, then things will kind of occur to you. So your ability to kind of go forth from that is the most important. And that's one of the reasons we started to do a little bit stricter criteria for being practitioners, because we realized that as people send more people to practitioners, we just want to make sure that they're grounded in this work and not having like one foot in one world and one foot in the other world, because the outside in world is very different from looking at life from the inside out. And when you try to combine the two, people get pretty lost and get the power of what they have is just lost. Because the power in this work is in the feeling that people get, not an intellectual understanding. And we live in a world that in the information application world, right? So tell me what this is so I can apply it in my life. Tell me what this is so I can use it in my job. Tell me what this is so that I can do something with it. But it's just you. It's just really all of us, that we are all the principles in action 24/7. So it's seeing how life works through us, and then being able to go with it rather than kind of sabotaging it with our own insecure and negative thinking.
I love what you're saying there, and you mentioned a couple times the feeling, and I think that's what first connected me 6 years ago, was this conversation about a beautiful feeling. You know, you'll find this beautiful feeling. And when I arrived on Salt Spring for my first experience, the only feeling I had is, when are you going to get started and what the hell is this about? I don't get it. And so could you elaborate just a little bit on the feeling of things and what they're actually speaking to when they say that?
You know, I was listening to Elsie Spittle talk at we did a training on the kind of the relevance of the teachings of Sydney Banks, or the like what are the discoveries that Sydney Banks had in the field of psychology. And at the end, she talked about it in a way that I thought was really beautiful, because it's a deeper feeling. it's a lot. It's not like one feeling, you know, first of all, it's like, but there's a feeling that comes with knowing, where you settle in and you find peacefulness, you find joy, you find a sense of security. You know, it's like lacking of fear. You know, the first time I remember, the first time I got up one morning was like, oh, I don't feel afraid anymore. Now, if you'd asked me the day before if I was afraid, I would have said no. But when it was gone, then I could feel it. And so it's a feeling of happiness. You know, like at first I was like, it felt like 1,000 flower petals flowing through me. It was this just magical feeling. And sometimes it's just a really deep quietness that comes about. And as we get into that quiet space, we have a feeling of security that comes with that because our mind gets quiet. And then from within us comes this beautiful feeling. That's a feeling of connectedness. It's a feeling of, it's kind of funny sometimes when, because you start laughing at yourself, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, because you start to see your thoughts, right? You get into that space and you start to see what you're thinking. I remember thinking to myself, God, no wonder I'm so depressed. Look what I've been thinking about. It was like shocking to me to see how negative my thinking was, because I really didn't think of myself as a negative person. Yet, believe me, I was very caught up in negative, insecure thoughts. So as what happens with insight, when you see things, when you get that shift in you and you see that you're creating your experience, that what's coming from you is creating what you're feeling and what you're seeing and everything in your reality. When you see that, it's like such a relief because you don't have to do all that thinking about it. You're just brought into the moment. And so it's the feeling is a universal feeling, yet we all experience it in a little different ways. And it's by degree, you know, it's like sometimes people think like, oh yeah, I was happy yesterday. That was it. Well, there's a difference in the feeling in that we're talking about is that you know, you've tapped in to something more powerful than you. You know, you've tapped into what Sydney Banks would call mind, the energy that creates all things. And it's like your personal self drops away for a minute. And you're just really in gratitude, in deep states of gratitude.
I'm hesitating turning on my mic because I know they're blowing outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that. It's like, well, and I'm just thinking, okay, can you break now? Can you break? I was getting the beautiful feeling, though, the beautiful feeling of knowing that it's all okay. They're going
Yeah.
to blow away.
I'm
Um,
as grateful as you and not me today.
and I'm thinking, where can I go? Am I going to go to the bathroom? Anyway, I'm laughing. I I love the conversation around the feeling because if there was anything that I really got clear very very quickly was that I wasn't present for the feeling and the difference between what it really looked like when I was and how that felt to me and then knowing that I could create more and more of that. And that was probably one of the largest insights. I remember Elsie saying on my first venture over there to the little school on Salt Spring, saying, "Oh well, okay, so we'll go for lunch, and we'll come back at around 3." And I was thinking to myself, "You're giving us 3 hours for lunch? Like this? What the heck is going on here?" Because I was always looking for data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they were really pointing myself and the whole room in the direction of go see what you can see. Go see what's out there. Go experience something new.
Yeah, you know, it's really so powerful when we get quiet. And most people struggle with that because they're trying to get quiet, right? So then you're thinking about how to get quiet, and that takes you in the wrong direction. But what happens is that, you know, it's kind of like if you're like, I live in the world of rainbows. And I've lived here many, many years, and I still am, my breath gets taken away when I see an iridescent rainbow. It doesn't matter. It's like, oh, there's a rainbow. And there's a way that comes through us all the time. Like all of a sudden you're like, your child is born, and you walk in the room, and you're in the room, and now there's three of you in the room, right? It's like this feeling that comes through of such a deep love, such a deep connectedness. And we have those moments all the time. That's what we're pointing to, is that it's like your personal self drops away, and your mind quiets, and you tap into this energy that creates all of us, that we are all a part of. And at that point, no one is different from anybody else. Nobody has a bigger feeling than other people. I mean, they might be in a deeper state of consciousness than you are, but we all have the same potential to live in a beautiful feeling. But in order to do that, you gotta be open to seeing how your own thinking gets you speeded up and into all kinds of other feelings. Right. So like happiness is one of the things that when I first heard this, I thought, happy, I don't want to, people that are happy are obnoxious. Like I thought that happy was like hyper happy, like la 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 la. And so that was not what I was looking for at all. But peacefulness, I knew I needed that. I was very insecure. I was searching, trying to find somebody or something that could teach me how to feel better. Because I knew at one level that wasn't my natural state. I knew I didn't need to stay there. In fact, that's why I was going to get out of the field, because I thought, I'm not happy, and my clients aren't happy, and my other colleagues, they're not happy either. So this is not the happy place. That's for sure. But I didn't really know where else to look. And I knew it was spiritual. And so I started studying with a psychic, because that was as spiritual as I could get. I was not I kind of got disenchanted with religion. So I went for that. Then I was like, I remember one time we did astro traveling, and everybody in the room was laying down, and they were relaxing, going into this calm place, right? And then they said, okay, well, just, go do your thing. And so I opened my eyes and I look around, everybody's still in the room, right? And nobody left the room. But when they came back, they were talking about how they went to North Minneapolis, and they went here and they went there. And I was like, okay, this is not it either. And then, it was like, I remember I went to a psychic, and she told me I was going to die at 43. Well, thank God she was wrong about that. But, it was like, okay, this just didn't feel right. Like I was kind of onto it, then it didn't feel right. So I kept like being open to finding something that felt right. And when I was in the audience and I listened to this, I went, boom, I know this is right. Not, I think this is right. I knew it. I saw it. And when you see it, you drop into this space that's already inside you. It's already there. It's like nobody's lacking in it. Nobody's missing it. And then it's a process of going deeper and deeper, because, the most enlightened people on the face of the planet all said, there's more than what I know. And, I don't know about you guys, but I've got quite a long ways to go before I'm Buddha or Christ or anybody else that's been quite enlightened. So that's the thing, is there's always more. So like this is like 1980, so 40 years. Yeah, 41 years I've been doing this. And I'm still as jazzed about it as I was 40 years ago. That's the deal. It's like, oh wow, it's so new. Like Judy and I, when we were doing our last two podcasts, we were like so jazzed, because we were like coming up with things that we'd never thought about before. And that's kind of the process, isn't it? It's like when we change and we transform, you have to leave yourself behind and really claim your more true self, the self that's the healthy self. And as you let go of insecure thinking and your mind gets quieter, you get insights as to how it all works. And then that's what provides you with more quietness. So quieting your mind isn't something you can do. It's something that happens when you see life from the inside. It just happens. And then it keeps happening and it keeps happening.
Yeah.
Caroline's got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Caroline. Love it.
Hi, Kelly. Hi, Christine. Thank you so much. So it's on the quietening of the mind that I want to talk today because, as Kelly knows, I'm quite new to the principles. Been in the principles 2 years ago when I joined the conference in London, and I've taken a lot from that, and then we went into lockdown in the UK, and suddenly my busy, hectic life slowed down and actually allowed me to find the feeling, find the moments of being present a lot more with my family, with myself. And that was always great. And I always said to myself, I wonder what it's going to be like when things get busy and things get hectic again. And I wonder how the principles are going to sort of be with me in my learning, but also help me in those times. And Christine, I'm looking at your dog the whole time, sitting behind you, chilled and calm. And that's how I was until about 4 weeks ago, when life decided, you know what, Caroline, you've had it quite easy over this period. We're going to throw loads of things at you. And I've had maybe 7 different issues that I've had to deal with. And it's kind of thrown everything at me. So I've taken on board, I think, what the principles have kind of taught me and where I'm at with my learning with it, trying to just deal with everything that life is throwing at me, but also trying to keep afloat, not go into the storm, but try and keep my head above the storm, because before that, I was kind of, my life slowed down. I was at the right pace. I was able to be present. I was able to have those feelings of contentment and deep contentment. All of a sudden, in the last 4 weeks, I'm kind of just racing against time just to keep afloat. And so my question is, when life, and it does happen, when life gets busy and life decides to throw things at you, multiple things at one time, how do you still try to have those moments of being present and calm, well, not calm, but present, and try and get in a quiet place? Because for me at the moment, the only time I get into that quiet place is probably when I get to bed at night, get under the covers and go, oh, you know, that's it for a day. We'll firefight again tomorrow. So that's really my question. How, when life gets super busy, and we all have that, after all, that is life, how do we still use the principles to ground us and try and take moments out of those busy, hectic times to actually get us, you know, in the right mind frame. Yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying? Am I making myself clear?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things, Caroline. It's like right now in what's happening with you, you're going through what I call you're being tested. And the test is, are you going to take your life seriously, or are you going to stay in a good feeling? So what you're looking for is kind of a deeper understanding of what's going on. Like, your mind can't be speeded up by life. Life is what it is. And as your mind changes, it slows down. So what happens is things happen in our life, and then we get insecure, and then we get thinking. And once you're back on the thinking train, you're off to the races. right? And so you're trying to think your way through all that rather than just really take some time to listen and quiet down. I would listen to a Sydney Banks tape, because as you connect more with that feeling, you start to see that the outside world isn't taking you out of that. It's like it's the thinking that you're doing about whatever's happening in your life. Like life happens, right? Shit happens in life. And then we kind of it's like an opportunity to see how to keep your grounding, even though that's going on. So it's like sometimes what happens is that we learn the principles and we start to see how they work rather than seeing that's really me working. This is how I work. And when you come back and make it just be about how you're feeling in the moment, like when I first learned this, we didn't even call them principles, right? It was just really kind of this good feeling you can live in and this ability you have to get quiet. And it was really about listening instead of thinking, right? And so the more you can just kind of be in that mode of listening to your own wisdom to guide you and get your mind kind of back into being connected with that feeling, then I think you'll notice that your life will calm down, because the inside is always creating the outside. So it's not life doing it to you. That's how it looks. So when it looks like that, you know you've got caught in the illusion of thought. So then you gotta like reset, calm down, say, okay, this is me creating this. I don't like this feeling. I remember this feeling, right? Okay, this is the way I was living. I want to go back to that other feeling, right? So then just stay focused on that and really listen to your wisdom about what you need to do to change. Because you know, I don't know what you should do, but you do.
That's very helpful. That's
Yeah.
very helpful. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just trained. We're really trained that when there's a problem, we should get up in our head and think about it. And then once you start doing that, they start coming at you like, you know, like you're in the Star Wars ride at Disneyland and it's coming at you. So you just got to get turned around again, get quiet, and then take a look at your life.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Tom. Hi.
Hey. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Tom.
And thanks for doing this, Kelly. I really appreciate it's really popping for me when you're talking about the feeling. And when I first got into this a couple of years ago, I knew that was important, but I couldn't really understand what it meant. And then a couple of months ago, I heard an old Sid recording, and it was so interesting. He used the term beautiful feeling. And when he said that, it's like something popped in me. And so definitely just like listening to Sid and being like, I feel like I'm constantly being directed all day long, resetting. And it's not even me, it's just resetting. Look here, look here, look here. And it's taken over to the point where the words really have become somewhere in the last couple of weeks or months, like the words have become secondary. And so I really appreciate it. And I can feel it as you're speaking about it, and I can feel it right now.
Yeah, it's really amazing because the feeling that we're talking about is it's something that you can't think your way into, right? So you can't think, oh, am I in a beautiful feeling now? Look how happy I am. Look how nice I am. Oh, so you can act like that, right? But when it's not you, you suffer because your mind's going so fast, because it's another thing you have to think about. Now I got to think about all my life, and then I got to think about being in a good feeling as well. So it becomes like too much thinking. And so that's why, like, as our mind's quiet and our mind quiets from getting an insight. And so when you were listening to Sid, and he said that, it really wasn't that word, because he says that in every tape.
Right.
You know, but something in you shifted and you heard it from a deeper space.
Yeah.
And then you connected with the feeling that he was talking from. And that's really, I mean, listening is a really undersold trait, because most of us are thinking instead of listening. And when you're just still and you listen, something clicks for you. And as they used to call it, the penny drops, but now I guess it's the credit card that drops. It's like all of a sudden it just clicks in and you see it differently. This is just like click. Oh, and then you start thinking again, right? Now I'm outside in. There it is. And it's hard to really describe that feeling of knowing and connectedness at the same time. Yeah. And beautiful feeling is really the only way that the only words that can describe it, because words that even doesn't do it justice.
Yeah.
It's the best we can do is to point people in the direction of having a feeling that's so deep and so different that they're not used to it. And then as you awaken to that, then you start getting insights, right? Then you see your thinking everywhere and you start to have all these insights. That's a great story, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also good to know, like, it's humbling too, because you can't, like, it can't be put into words. I couldn't even describe it to anyone. I could just say, look within, just exactly what Sid said. But I realized it's important for me. I don't really talk to people very much professionally yet, but it's important for me to stay in that good feeling rather to be in the trying to explain it thing, because it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Very well. But yeah.
No, it doesn't work at all, actually. I mean, people do it. I mean, people, people are smart and they can listen to the words and they kind of get an intellectual understanding of what the principles are, but there's no feeling behind it. And it's just like anything else, and it's just a better way to think about things. But the power of change, really, the kind of change that transforms people, always comes from within, and it doesn't take any intellectual thinking.
Right.
In fact, that's what gets in the way, is we think we know stuff. And once you learn the principles, I mean, believe me, you can form another belief system and you can talk about it, like you can talk and talk and talk, and there's no feeling behind it.
Right.
And so it's easy to lose it, because it's not about what we're talking about. And that's just our best way of trying to share it.
Yeah.
The thing about the principles is that this understanding has been around for eons, for millennia, really. But what Sid brought back that's so helpful is a way of talking about how it all works.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same for everybody, for every person, all the time, and doesn't change.
Yeah.
And that certainty of that is what the principles bring to us. It takes everything down to whoosh, right? And when we get up here, it kind of reminds me of the ocean. At the top of the ocean, there's lots of waves and it bounces you around and you get caught up, and sometimes it's fun, but you're kind of caught up in it. If you go snorkeling, you go just below it. It's pretty like, oh, magical. Oh, interesting. Oh, this is beautiful. But if you go scuba diving, it gets really, really quiet. Like everything slows down. And you're just in this you're in the moment, truly, and experiencing that sense of weightlessness. It's a really interesting feeling in that when you go deep in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And so when you go deep in the feeling, you feel that kind of weightlessness. You feel this joy. You feel like one of the things that I had a kind of an eating disorder, and I was obsessed about my weight and about losing weight and not being fat. And so my teacher told me, he said, Chris, you still think too much. And I was like, well, what do I think about? And I thought, I think about food and calories a lot. Oh, I could stop thinking about that. And suddenly this fear came in my head and says, if you stop that, you're going to be like the fat lady in the circus. And then the next thought was, yeah, but if you were in that feeling, it wouldn't matter. Yeah. And that's that's the thing. It's like truly when you're in that feeling, nothing matters.
Right.
Like you're totally fine. You're totally okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could just say one more thing, the thing that I'm also seeing is when I look within for the feeling, if it doesn't feel super great in the moment, I don't think like there's something wrong. It's like, okay, if you put a scale, it went from 10 to 8 or whatever. It's okay. That's just the way it is right now. It's the best I can do. Like I'm up on the waves, but I'm still in it. And
Yeah.
it's not up to me to go all the way down. And that
Right.
is so liberating.
Yeah. Yeah. You just don't take yourself so seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah. You just know that's not you. It's like, oh, there I am thinking again. I mean, that never goes away. That's 40 years, let me tell you. I love to be right. I love to think, I love to do that. And unfortunately, that's, it's a gift that we have to be able to do that. It's a beautiful gift to think, to be able to do that. But it just, when you get caught doing that, it's like you can feel it. So it's like hitting the speed bumps, when you're driving down the road and
Right.
you hit the speed bumps, it's like, oh, okay, gotta turn around again. I just got a little turned around here. Come on back.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Christine. So lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great story, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Linda,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you so much, Christine and Kelly. I've been sitting here in such a lovely feeling and trying not to let my thinking about my question take me out of it, actually. So I hope I get the question out succinctly and clearly. I've got a couple of clients who, one of them's bipolar and one of them's got ADHD. And during sessions with them, I find that they can, obviously, I know that they can find this feeling, they drop into the feeling, but it's like it's almost as quickly as they get into it, they're out of it again. And does that slow down in your experience the longer you work with people, or is that going to be their experience all the time?
Oh no, I mean, it's just they're just people. Like they just start thinking again. It's like some people are high velocity thinkers and some of them are not so high velocity thinkers. And people that have psychological diagnoses like that just mean that they're really good at using thinking in the wrong way. And so that's usually it's their source of security. And, the other thing is if they've got those diagnoses already, they've already been in the mental health system. So they've been told that this is the way they are. And so that might, take a while for you to be able to help them with that. But, I have them listen to SID tapes as best they can, and the more they get quiet, the more they can move beyond that. I mean, they're not stuck with those diagnoses.
I think that's the issue. A lot of people believe that they are that sort of diagnosis and think that's it.
Yeah, well, they're told that they are. And it's like when nothing helps you, you get convinced that that's true. Like, oh man, it is. And it's like everybody's going to be different, but if they understand how the principles work, then whatever their habit is, whatever the way they are is coming through them, they'll be able to manage it better. Like I have clients that hallucinate. And like he was so funny because he was hallucinating a lot. So he would use cocaine. And when he would use cocaine, he'd stop hallucinating. Of course, he'd beat up his father then. So that wasn't very good. And so he had to, like get off of the cocaine and see how to manage the hallucinations. And he would, by the time he finished therapy with me, he would still hear voices, but he could tell then that his medication needed to be adjusted. So instead of believing that his voices, he said, my thoughts are starting to create voices again. And I think my medication needs to be adjusted. And so he'd adjust his medication and he was able to, go back to work and live without beating his father up and manage that. Like, could he go beyond that? Probably. But that's just where he decided last time I saw him anyway, that's where he was at. So it's just seeing that people, whatever's wrong with them physically or mentally, once they understand the principles, they just learn how to live in a healthier state of mind and their experience doesn't freak them out. otherwise, 'cause people that are bipolar just, do a lot of thinking, a lot of negative thinking, and then they bum themselves out, and then they flip into this other state of mind where they're going a million miles an hour because that feels better than being really depressed. But it's interesting to me to see how people have learned to use thought in a way that tries to help them, even though it's creating this issue. Now, you also have to understand that there's always, like, I've been in the mental health field for a long time, and so each 10 years there's a new diagnosis. That's the diagnosis of choice. And so bipolar is currently the thing. And the other thing that's happening right now is that in the world, people are thinking that they have pandemic mental health problems. And so now they have pandemic anxiety and pandemic depression and this and that, and everybody's got mental illness. And it's kind of like there's a lot of validation for them being sick. So that's kind of what I do, is I really focus on mental well-being and the fact that people are healthy no matter what, and just keep pointing that out to them. So if they change once, if they get into a good feeling for a minute, that's what I'm interested in. That's what I help to. And then they just start to get more awareness of it themselves, and they move into it more and more. And everybody does it at a different timeline.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. It really helps. I mean, I certainly see that they do drop into the feeling, and they acknowledge that they do. Even they think, oh, I feel really different, but then it's almost like they wind themselves back up again, because that's the familiar and what they're doing. But if I keep pointing it out, and hopefully it'll get longer and longer. That's really lovely. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just, we're all kind of taught we should be thinking, and when you have these experiences, these psychological experiences that are really dramatic, you get scared by it. You don't know what's going on. You feel depressed forever. You want to kill yourself. It's like, oh my God, what's going on here? And because we haven't had a way of helping people understand what's going on with them, then they get freaked out, and they are, they make it worse actually by now getting freaked out about being freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
I want to interject and just say something. I don't know where I heard this, but it was a point made by someone in the community, where when we focus on the gap between the times people are in what they think they are and not in what they think they are, there's a gap there. When they think they're in a psychotic moment, and then what about when they're not? And so there's always times when they're not in those moments, and pointing in that space, that direction, that time frame, so that they can see that there's always a moment when they're not bipolar. They're not their label or disorder, and making that space larger for them to see that, well, what about when you're not doing that? What are you doing there? What's happening then? And I just thought that was a beautiful way to point someone who's grabbed the label and wanting to now, stack the pancakes about how bad it is. It's like, well, what about yesterday when you were just sitting with me having tea? What about that moment? What's going on there? I don't know if that's helpful for you, but it really was helpful for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, Christine, this has been amazing. I'm loving the questions coming in, and I'm curious, does anybody else have anything they'd like to say? It doesn't have to be a question, just a comment or something you might have seen for yourself in the conversation. The one thing the beautiful arena of 3Ps allows for us is that we can sit in the silence and feel so good. And maybe that's where we want to leave it. How do you feel, Chris?
Well, the other thing, I just was going to say one more thing about looking for health in people, is that as a coach or as a therapist, it's kind of like you're not really trained to draw the health out of people. And so what Kelly was talking about is kind of that whole thing where you're you're really focused on looking for the health in people. And as you do that, you can hear how people have health even in their worst states of mind. They have the ability to tap into something deeper, no matter what their state of mind is. So that's why, you know, people are really in a crisis state. The first thing that any responder does is to calm themselves down first and then calm the person down, right? It's kind of like as we get calmer, we just kind of settle down, then our mind comes back into the moment more, and we start to naturally tap into the health that's in us. But seeing that as people understand what mental well-being is, like in most trainings that you go to as a coach or as a therapist, they don't even teach what mental well-being is. Unless something's changed dramatically in the last 6 months, there's no college programs for graduate students that even have a course on mental well-being. And so this is really new in the world. It's really new in the professions. So the more you can see how that is in yourself, the more you can see it in the people that you work with. You know, so that really, like, the fact that people come to therapy when they've been told they have an incurable illness is their own wisdom. Because why bother? Like, why would you bother to go to therapy or go get some coaching if you thought that you had an incurable illness? Right? So the fact that they're looking, that there's still a part of them there, they're there in front of you. So I figure, even if somebody's court ordered to be in front of me, I figure they've created that in their life. They've created this experience that they're sitting in front of me. And so my job is just to be as clear of a conduit as I can for that feeling to come through me and awaken the feeling in the other person. And that's about all you can do, is like you're the mirror, and you're just looking to point out, look, see how you're the same here? See how you're the same here? And as they see that, they start to awaken to what's within them. And they'll start telling you about times in their life when they were okay. Even in the week, like I have clients that come in and they go, oh, I had a terrible week, it's all bad. And then by the end of the session, they're in a better state. Oh, I forgot to tell you, this happened this week. And they're like, oh yeah, isn't that interesting that you just thought about that? So, you know, it's kind of like just remembering that hopelessness and helplessness and kind of being trapped in a diagnosis is just a thought. It's not a condition. And that people are free to move in and out of that all the time, and they do. But showing them that they do that instead of you doing it, right? Because that's the other thing that happens, is that in the world of therapy, people think that the therapist fixes them. So they come in with that outside in experience where it looks like going to therapy is going to fix me, and getting that to shift to see that, oh, I have to see this. You're just pointing me in the direction. I got to do this. As is empowering to them, but is also takes you off of the out of the hot seat, because you realize that you really can't change them anyway. Because if you could change another person, believe me, the world would be in a different place. I would have done this already, but it totally is impossible. All I can do is have a nice life myself. And that's, I think, that the beautiful thing about the principles is that it's about having a nice life yourself, making your life be a reflection of the feelings that you want to live in. So for me, it was like seeing that I wanted to have a quiet life. I didn't want to work 80 hours a week. I mean, I wanted to work 80 hours a week. If I could see how to do that and be in a good feeling, I would have done it. But I knew better than that. I knew that I had to get my life in order for me to help somebody else. I had to change myself. I had to be a different person. And as I changed me, and I was just really focused on seeing what I could see and having the insights and the fun that would come from that, my work got much better. So you got to make sure to do it that way. If you do it the other way, you'll get caught up in trying to fix people. And the 3 principles understanding will not fix people.
Thank you for that clarity. That was awesome. I really like that. Almost a little redirect. That's great. We have another question, Chris, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
William, great to see you, my friend.
Hi.
Hey, Bill, how are you doing?
I really like, this is great, but I really like what you've just been talking about and what it makes. It's like that deep place got triggered, and it makes me think that when I'm with someone else, whether it's in a coaching or what, it's like two magnets being attracted. Their spot, their moment, and my moment. And I love that. And the more that I guess, just understand, surrender, know that. And I had this thought this morning. It's so reassuring. I don't have to be me. The me, this identity, this person that I spend most of my life protecting, defining, doing whatever, that I really don't have to be that, because when in the moment, everything is taken care of. And I just hear you saying that in so many different ways. And the assurance of that really comes through. And I think when you're in the presence of someone, and what comes to my mind, one of the first times I think I remember seeing you, Christine, I don't know, years, but I remember hearing you talk about, coming across the principles. But when you started talking about Sid Banks, you had tears and appreciation and love. Now that spoke volumes to me. And that's what I remember. And I think those are the moments that they're past, but they're not past. They're still living. And that's somehow the moment just has a way of transforming itself. And I just appreciate this reminder. And anyway, I just thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's great to see you, Bill.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. It's kind of like that the feeling gets so strong and it bubbles up in people and it comes out your eyes. It's like it's a powerful thing when that happens. And there's nothing that you do to make that happen. It's just like all of a sudden you drop into this feeling that's amazing. Like I used to see people that would cry because they were happy. And I used to be kind of like the dog that's cocking its head, like, what is that? Why would you cry when you were happy? It didn't compute for me. Yeah.
And the last thing, what Tom said about a beautiful feeling, the combination of those two senses and the combination of, I'm not much of a in my smell, but I think it's when as many of the senses are in that moment, that's the depth of that feeling. Mm-hmm. And so I hear kind of the moment collapsing, everything in that moment. So somehow.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share or say? Well, I do. I want to say with the most gratitude in my heart for you coming to the room and sharing your wisdom with everybody here, but also with all the people that watch these recordings. And there are many that can't make it to the room. I think that I've been profoundly affected and affected by what you had to share. And I too saw something similar to William when we were in a room once where the tears just came to you. And they come to me. They come to me in these moments and in these rooms. And I'm just so grateful for the labor of love that all of you bring in doing these types of calls. So thank you, Chris. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you for asking me. And I want to say a shout out to the Becks. I haven't seen you guys for a long time. Hi.
I don't know if they want to come on and say hello.
Is that Richard? Is that you?
Richard Mayer. Yes, he just got in the room right now.
Hi.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard. Great to see you guys. Thank you so much for asking me. And oops, my dog came to say aloha too.
There's the Vex. They've just come to say hi. There they are.
Yep. Okay. That's enough. Get up.
I love the puppy love sitting chill in the back there.
I know. You know, I have clients when I see them online and the dogs sit there and they go like, that dog calms me down so much. It's like, really, the dog, you're 5,000 miles away. But they have kind of a sense of peacefulness that they get into. Hey, Jim.
Absolutely. Yeah, please, Jim, come on down if you'd like to say hello. Rosalind and Jim.
Hi, Christine.
Hi, how are you?
Just fine, thanks. Actually, great.
Good. So nice to see you.
Yes, you too. You look wonderful.
Yeah, you guys do too. It's great. I am so grateful that you came on, and it's great. I just love Zoom. It's like some of the most wonderful things. You get to connect with people and you're thousands of miles away.
Yeah, it's marvelous, isn't it?
Yeah. Wonderful.
I feel it's in the Kind Mind room. It's amazing how I'm not an original, not even close, but all the originals meet in the room and say hi to each other, and it's like, oh, hi, old friend. I just love seeing that. Just love.
Yeah. And that's how it is, though. You know, as people get in touch with that feeling, it's like you're like your family, and it's a different kind of family, but a nicer one because you don't have to deal with all the personal stuff. But there's a connection that we have that we all know where we came from. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it has been a wonderful session, and thank you so much again for coming. And to everybody here, I just wanted to mention that Psychology Has It Backwards is available to everybody. It's a podcast with Christine Heath and Judith Sedgman. I've been ferociously seeking the wise counsel within there for the last week or so, getting filled up. And I would recommend it to anybody looking for a new way of seeing something. And Chris, is there any way that if there was anybody here who wanted to get a hold of you that you might want to share?
Yeah, you can just send me an email. My email is my name, Christine with a J, Heath @gmail.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going to call this beautiful session a wrap and send everybody love. For those of you coming regularly next week, we have the lovely, let me just make sure, I want to confirm so I don't get it wrong. Marina Galan. We'll see Marina Galan.
Love her.
Yes.
She's got a great feeling.
She has a beautiful feeling, just as you do. Yeah. So for those of you coming next week, we'll see you all then, and take care, be kind, and full of love.
Okay.
Bye.
Aloha.
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 Bye, everybody. Bye, Richard. Bye, guys. Bye, Bye, Michelle. Bye, Katie.